Morning. The other day I talked about going and visiting our old place that that Tom built for us when our children were just little, and we had a couple of our babies while we were there. Anyway, we had 4 children, and 2 of them were born while we lived there. But I got to thinking about the other places that I'd lived, and the picture you're seeing, maybe you're just seeing the ceiling, I don't know. The picture on the top there, 3 times I tried to paint the home that I grew up in as a child, and it is no longer there. It's been torn down. There was 10 acres of olives on the place. They've been rooted out, torn out. I think some of them were sold for landscaping, but they're gone. And this place also had, I think it was the most beautiful and biggest barn in the neighborhood. It burnt. So everything is gone from that place, but 3 times I've attempted to paint it, and I'll show you the 3 different times. And I want to tell you about my painting. I took an art class in high school, and the teacher took me aside one day, and she was right. And she said, you know, you'll never be good at painting. Or, no, you'll never be good at art. Well, I don't know why she thought. And I know I'm lacking. But, you know, if you want to paint, paint. If you want to do something, don't let somebody discourage you just because you don't do it up to their standards. So this is another one. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little man down at the bottom. His name was Little Joe. And then, actually, this one was inspired by it too. And so these are the 3 paintings that came from my childhood home. But as long as I'm here, this is the oldest painting I have. And I painted that in my 20s. So that's the very oldest one in the house that I have. I had some others, but they're gone. Okay, and this one over here, I don't know if you can see it. I painted that last year when I was 80. So it goes from 20 to 80. And another thing about that teacher, I had 2 classes from her. And the other class was a sewing class. And I had made a nightgown, a flannel nightgown, and I made it short with long sleeves. It was short, and she said, whoever would wear a flannel nightgown that was short, because if it's flannel, we want it to be long and warm. Well, how many of you have a short flannel nightgown today? I have one. I bought it. I didn't make it. And I was just before my time. That was a trouble. Anyway, the other thing on that home that I showed you the paintings, the other thing that I have a memory from is I wrote a book. It's not really this thick because I had it self-published and they only printed on one side. So it would be half this size if they printed on both sides. But it's called My Significant Others, A Story of a Child Raised in the 40s with 50 Others by Annie McKinney. And I used my maiden name because it was when I was a child, and that's what I was called. Anyway, I thought I would just read just a small portion since I've got you trapped here, but of course I really don't because you can hit the button anytime. Okay. It starts out, I'm not going to start at the beginning, so for the first sentence might not make sense. Those hungry men sitting in the family living room waiting for their evening meal bring me back to the beginning. They were boarders, working away from their homes, returning to their own families on weekends. Passing the evening newspaper around, they job talked, speculated on the weather, swapped rumors, waited to eat. These boarders were the first in a series of people to live with my family. They were followed by service families and those who couldn't find housing because of children and pets. And this was coming, it was coming to the end of World War II now. They were followed, and then older couples who were in transition periods of their lives and needed our home for a few weeks or a month or so. Grandparents were included in this list. My father's parents each spent time with us, coming at different times because they were divorced, a concept I couldn't grasp at my early age. They were always two individual people, never a couple that I loved. My grandfather came first. He lived with us until he died. My grandmother came last. She lived with us until she died. They both died in our home. Later, as World War II came to an end, my family began to take in the elderly, those with emotional disabilities in mind and body and spirit from institutions for the mentally ill. They came from the doors of Imola and the halls of DeWitt that claimed 7 miles of hallway. In my first 18 years, over 50 others played a part in the drama of my father's life, including the boarders, the sick in mind and soul, the feeble of years, and the guests who came to visit and stayed to live for a while amongst the sane and insane. And at times it was difficult to know who had which roles. I was the impressionable audience, taking in bits and pieces of the drama of their lives, a little here, a little there, till I became the sum of who I am. They added variety and spice, sorrows and joys, but the greatest, the knowledge of life. And it goes on, talks about different ones, talks about the home that we lived in. And I wrote it for my children, and so that's my book, and those are my pictures, and that's how I survived the 80s. So have a good day.